This story is titled, My Girlfriend Announced the Engagement Party Was Canceled and She Was Taking Me to Court. I simply said okay, then executed my revenge plan by removing her name from the expensive penthouse property I was about to register in her name. The next day, court officials called saying she made a huge mistake that would cost her massive losses. Immediately after, she was on her knees at my doorstep with tears in her eyes, begging for forgiveness. Hey Reddit, I'm a longtime lurker but first-time poster, and I'm using a throwaway account for obvious reasons since some people involved might recognize my main account. This is going to be a long post, so buckle up for what I can only describe as a wild ride from start to finish. I've been debating whether to share this story for months now, but I saw a similar post hit the front page yesterday and figured it might be cathartic to finally get this off my chest. Maybe it'll help someone else recognize the red flags that I completely missed along the way. Let me start with some background about myself. My name is Jack. I'm 32 years old, and I work as a mechanical engineer at an aerospace company here in Chicago. I'm pretty much your average guy, slightly overweight, but working on it, dealing with a receding hairline that I'm slowly coming to terms with, and definitely more comfortable discussing tensile strength than fashion trends. I grew up in a middle-class family in Wisconsin, put myself through college with a combination of scholarships and part-time jobs, and was fortunate enough to land a decent position right out of school. Then I met Natalie and everything changed. She was 29 at the time, working as a marketing executive at a prestigious firm downtown. To be completely honest, she was way out of my league looks-wise. The kind of woman who looked like she had walked straight off a magazine cover. We met at my friend Ethan's birthday party about 3 years ago. She was there as his co-workers plus one, and to this day, I still have absolutely no idea why she gave me her number that night. Women like Natalie, who are that stunning and successful, don't usually go for guys like me. But we seemed to click, or at least I thought we did at the time. The first year of our relationship was absolutely amazing. She was fun, adventurous, and seemed genuinely interested in my work, even though aerospace engineering isn't exactly thrilling dinner conversation for most people. She would ask thoughtful questions about my current projects, send me supportive texts before big presentations, and she even wore this dorky NASA t-shirt I bought her to bed sometimes, which I found incredibly endearing. Looking back now with clearer vision, there were red flags scattered throughout our relationship from the very beginning. But as they say, love is blind, and I was completely blinded by what I thought we had together. She would make these subtle comments about my potential, how I could definitely become a senior engineer if I just worked a little harder, or how I should dress better for client meetings so that management would finally notice me. At the time, I genuinely thought she was being supportive and encouraging. Now I realize she was systematically trying to mold me into something I wasn't, reshaping me to fit her vision of what a successful partner should look like. About a year into our relationship, things started to shift noticeably. Her gentle suggestions gradually transformed into pointed criticisms. Suddenly, my perfectly comfortable apartment was too small for what she called an established professional. My reliable Honda, which had served me well for years, became embarrassing when parked next to her sleek BMW. My longtime friends were apparently holding me back because they weren't ambitious enough for her standards. Most painfully, my brother Daniel, who works in construction and has been my best friend since childhood, was gradually excluded from our social events. According to Natalie, he was too blue-collar for her social circle. But I was deeply in love, so I started making changes to accommodate her preferences. I started investing in nicer clothes, the kind that would make me look more polished at professional events. I began attending her company's pretentious work parties, where I found myself laughing at unfunny jokes from her boss just to fit in. I saw my brother Daniel less and less, which hurt more than I wanted to admit at the time. The distance between us grew as I prioritized Natalie's social expectations over my own family relationships. The most significant sacrifice came when I turned down a promotion opportunity in Boston. It would have been a substantial career advancement, but Natalie insisted we needed to stay in Chicago to be near her family and maintain her carefully cultivated social connections. I convinced myself that love meant making compromises, so I declined the offer without much of a fight. When I finally worked up the courage to propose after 2 years together, she cried tears of joy and said yes immediately. But almost before the ring was fully on her finger, she launched into planning a wedding that would cost more than my entire annual salary. Every time I brought up concerns about our budget, she would dismiss them with phrases like, "It's an investment in our social capital," and "These connections will pay off for both of us in the long run." So I opened a special savings account dedicated entirely to wedding expenses and started putting away significant chunks of my bonuses and overtime pay. Eventually, I had managed to save $26,000 just for wedding deposits and vendor payments. Throughout this entire process, Natalie never contributed a single cent to the wedding fund, always claiming she was saving for our future in other ways that she never quite specified. Looking back, I can't believe I didn't question this arrangement more seriously, but I was completely blinded by what I thought was love. About 6 months before our planned wedding date, Natalie started pushing hard for us to buy a house together. This wasn't just any modest starter home. She had her sights set on an $830,000 townhouse in the most expensive part of Evanston, right where all her executive friends lived. "Jack, we have to have a place in this neighborhood if we want to be taken seriously," she would insist, completely ignoring the fact that the mortgage payments would stretch my finances far beyond the breaking point. But once again, I found myself agreeing to her demands because I thought that's what partners do for each other. We signed preliminary mortgage documents with me listed as the primary borrower since my credit score was significantly better than hers. While I was wrestling with the financial stress, she was already deep into planning extensive renovations for our future home. She had created multiple Pinterest boards for each room and had even promised her parents they would have a dedicated guest suite with a private bathroom for when they visited from Minneapolis. Everything seemed to be falling into place according to her master plan. The wedding was just 4 months away. The house closing was scheduled for a month after our honeymoon, and I was desperately trying to figure out how to make the numbers work. I remember spending an entire evening sitting at my kitchen table with a detailed spreadsheet, trying to calculate how I could possibly afford the mortgage payments, the remaining wedding expenses, and still have enough money left over for basic necessities like food and utilities. No matter how I manipulated the numbers, the math simply wasn't working in our favor. Our combined income should have been more than sufficient for this lifestyle, but Natalie remained adamant about keeping our finances completely separate until after the wedding. "It's just cleaner that way," she would say whenever I brought up the topic. But somehow, despite this supposed separation, all the major expenses consistently landed on my side of the financial ledger. That night, I decided it was time for a serious conversation about our financial reality. I showed her my carefully constructed spreadsheet and explained my growing concerns about our ability to afford this lifestyle. I suggested that maybe we should consider looking at homes in a more affordable neighborhood, at least until we were more financially established as a married couple. She looked at me as if I had suggested we live in a cardboard box under a bridge. "Jack, do you want us to be successful or not? This neighborhood isn't just about having a nice house. It's about connections, opportunities, and being surrounded by people who will elevate our careers and social standing." "But we genuinely can't afford it," I insisted, trying to keep my voice calm and reasonable. "Not unless you're planning to contribute significantly to the mortgage payments." She sighed dramatically, as if explaining something obvious to a child. "I told you I'm handling all the wedding vendors and honeymoon planning. Plus, after we're married, I'll be up for a major promotion that will potentially double my current salary. We just need to present the right image until then, and everything will fall into place." This supposed promotion was completely news to me. She had never mentioned it before that conversation, but it gave me a glimmer of hope that maybe she was right. Maybe this short-term financial strain would pay off in the long run. So I ignored the persistent knot of anxiety in my stomach and agreed to move forward with the house purchase plans. We spent the following weekends house hunting together, attending open houses in the expensive neighborhood she had chosen. We met with interior designers because, according to Natalie, our current furniture wasn't nearly good enough for the new place we would be calling home. We also attended dinner parties with her friends who already lived in the area, where I felt increasingly out of place and uncomfortable. Despite my growing unease, Natalie seemed to absolutely thrive in these social situations. She would introduce me to everyone as my fiancé, the aerospace engineer, and I couldn't shake the feeling that she was presenting me more as some kind of status symbol rather than as a person she genuinely loved. Then came the text message that completely turned my world upside down and changed everything in an instant. I remember the exact moment when my entire life got flipped on its head. I was standing in the checkout line at Whole Foods with a basket full of random items, some frozen pizza, fancy scented trash bags, and a few energy drinks to help me power through a big project deadline that was looming at work. My phone buzzed with a notification, and I saw Natalie's name pop up on the screen. I didn't think anything unusual about it at first, figuring it was probably about dinner plans or yet another round of wedding venue drama that had been consuming most of our conversations lately. Instead, I received 8 words that felt like a devastating punch directly to my gut. Wedding's off. Expect a call from my lawyer. That was it. No explanation, no emotion, not even proper punctuation, except for that cold, final period at the end. It was like I was just some business deal she had decided wasn't worth her time anymore. I just stood there completely frozen like an idiot while other customers moved around me in line. The cashier had to tell me twice that it was my turn to pay. I remember mechanically going through the motions of paying for my groceries, then driving home in complete and utter silence. I sat in my apartment building's parking lot for what felt like 15 minutes before I could even summon the emotional strength to go inside and face my empty apartment. The strangest part of this entire surreal experience was that I wasn't crying or yelling or having any kind of dramatic emotional breakdown. I was just eerily quiet and numb. The only response I managed to text back was, "As you wish," a reference to the Princess Bride that she probably didn't even understand or appreciate. But I knew exactly what that text message really meant. It wasn't just about canceling our wedding ceremony. It was her way of saying, "Don't contact me directly. My lawyer will handle everything from now on." I was being discarded and thrown away like yesterday's garbage, and she clearly thought she held all the cards in this situation. But she had forgotten something pretty damn important in her calculations. As I sat there on my couch staring at her text message, something just clicked in my brain. I started thinking about the mortgage application, the wedding fund we had been building, the joint accounts we had just started setting up. Everything was still in progress. Nothing had been finalized yet. So I made a decision before I had even taken my coat off. I opened my laptop, logged into Chase Bank's mortgage application portal, and withdrew my application entirely. It took exactly 3 mouse clicks, and just like that, her dreams of owning the perfect Evanston townhouse completely collapsed. People reading this might think that was petty behavior on my part, and maybe it was to some degree. But after 3 years of slowly erasing myself to become what she wanted me to be, after all the sacrifices I had made for our supposed future together, this wasn't just about being petty or vindictive. This was about keeping some shred of my dignity intact and not allowing myself to be completely steamrolled by someone who clearly had no respect for me as a person. Still, I wasn't prepared for what would happen next. The hours that followed were absolutely surreal in ways I couldn't have imagined. I kept expecting my phone to explode with frantic calls and angry text messages from Natalie, demanding an explanation for my actions. But there was nothing but complete silence. Somehow, that deafening silence was worse than any angry confrontation would have been, because it confirmed what I was starting to suspect, that I had served my purpose in her life and now I was completely disposable. I barely slept at all that night. My mind kept racing in endless circles, replaying every significant moment of our 3-year relationship and searching desperately for clues I might have missed along the way. Was it something I had said recently? Something I had done wrong? Had she been planning this devastating betrayal all along? The questions kept piling up in my head with absolutely no answers in sight, creating a mental storm that refused to calm down. The next morning, I forced myself to go to work despite feeling like a complete zombie. My team lead took one look at my disheveled appearance and immediately asked if I was sick. I hesitated for a moment, then decided to just be honest. Natalie ended things yesterday. She called off our wedding, I managed to say. The genuine sympathy I saw in his eyes almost broke me completely. "Take the week off," he said quietly and compassionately. "This project will still be here when you get back and feel ready to work again." I nodded gratefully and headed back home, stopping at the grocery store to pick up some comfort food that might help me get through this nightmare. That's when I saw something that hit me like another punch to the gut. There was a bridal magazine at the checkout counter with a cover featuring a model wearing the exact same dress that Natalie had chosen for our wedding. I stood there in the checkout line staring at it, feeling this weird sense of complete disconnect from reality. Just yesterday morning, I was going to marry this woman who had been the center of my world. Today, she was essentially a stranger who had completely decimated my life with a single text message. Back at my apartment, I started the painful process of gathering all of Natalie's belongings that she had left at my place over the years. There were clothes she kept in my closet, her toiletries in my bathroom, and a few books scattered around. It struck me as oddly significant that it wasn't very much stuff, considering we had been together for 3 full years. Looking at the small pile of her possessions, I realized how little of herself she had actually invested in our relationship. Even her physical presence in my home had been minimal, as she always insisted we spend most of our time at her place because it was nicer and more sophisticated than mine. This was yet another red flag that I had somehow missed or ignored. I carefully boxed everything up, labeled it clearly as Natalie's things, and set it by my front door. Then I did something I had been putting off doing for months. I called my brother Daniel. Our conversation was brief but incredibly healing for my wounded soul. He didn't say, "I told you so," even though he had never fully trusted Natalie or felt comfortable around her. He simply said, "I'm coming over right now, and I'm bringing pizza." That night, catching up with my brother and talking through everything that had happened, I felt a strange and unexpected mix of devastating heartbreak and genuine relief. The devastation was obvious. My entire future had just imploded in the most humiliating way possible. But the relief took me longer to understand and process. It was like I had been holding my breath for 3 entire years, constantly contorting myself to fit Natalie's impossible vision of who I should be, and now I could finally exhale and be myself again. Less than 48 hours after receiving that life-changing text message, I was sitting on my couch eating leftover pizza and trying to process everything that had happened when my phone rang with an unknown number. I let it go straight to voicemail because I honestly wasn't emotionally prepared to deal with any additional stress or drama. A minute later, this message appeared on my phone. "Hello, this is Rebecca Goldstein, attorney for Miss Natalie Chambers. We urgently request a callback regarding your mortgage withdrawal, as this action may constitute breach of contract or financial interference. Please contact us immediately to discuss this matter." I almost laughed out loud at the urgently request part of that message. Suddenly, her lawyer wasn't sounding quite so cold and clinical anymore. It's funny how that professional tone changes when you hit people directly in their wallet where it really hurts. I didn't call back immediately. Instead, I just waited to see what would happen next. Sure enough, more calls followed throughout the day, along with several increasingly desperate emails, all with a growing sense of urgency and panic. They clearly weren't expecting me to fight back or stand up for myself. Natalie, in her typical fashion, must have assumed I would be completely destroyed by her rejection, and maybe even desperately begging her to reconsider our relationship. But I wasn't falling apart like she had probably hoped. I was just completely done with her and this entire toxic situation. The next day, I received a call from our mutual friend Ethan, and he sounded extremely awkward and uncomfortable. "Hey man, did you really pull out of the house deal?" he asked hesitantly. "Yep," I replied simply. "Okay, because Natalie is absolutely freaking out about it. Apparently, she already ordered like $22,000 worth of custom furniture for the place, and she's been telling all her friends at work that they should start looking for places in the same neighborhood so you could all be neighbors." I almost said not my problem, but managed to bite my tongue because I didn't want to come across as needlessly cruel, even though I honestly could have been justified in doing so. Ethan hesitated for a moment before adding something that really got under my skin. "She's been saying that you're being vindictive and that you're doing this specifically to punish her for ending the relationship. She even had the nerve to tell everyone at the office yesterday that you were financially abusing her by pulling out of the mortgage application." That statement made me laugh out loud in disbelief. Financially abusing her? The woman who never contributed a single cent to our future home or our wedding expenses? The woman who just tried to dump me by text message after 3 years together? Ethan, she can say whatever she wants to make herself feel better, but I'm not buying a house with someone who breaks up with me via text message like we're teenagers. There was a long, uncomfortable pause before Ethan said something that really disturbed me. "Yeah, that's completely fair on your part. But just so you know, she's been telling people different stories about why you guys actually broke up. To some people, she's saying it was a mutual decision that you both came to together. To others, she's hinting that there were serious problems in the relationship that she couldn't talk about openly. It's weird, man. After we hung up, I sat there thinking about those mysterious problems she was supposedly hinting at to people. What exactly was she trying to imply about me? That I was abusive in some way? Unfaithful? Controlling? The fact that she was spinning completely different stories to different people showed me that she was in full damage control mode, trying to manage her public image. But why would she need damage control if this breakup was entirely her decision, and she was confident in her choice? Something about this whole situation wasn't adding up at all. The days that followed were a strange and disorienting mix of emotional numbness, punctuated by moments of startling clarity about our relationship. I found myself remembering specific conversations with Natalie that had seemed completely innocuous at the time, but now took on a much more sinister meaning in hindsight. like the time she had casually mentioned that her previous ex-boyfriend had been financially generous with her, and how she had expected more from him in that regard, or how she would react with barely concealed disappointment whenever I mentioned putting money aside for retirement savings instead of spending it on luxury items that would enhance our lifestyle. I started going through old photos on my phone, looking at pictures of us together at various social events and gatherings. It was like looking at complete strangers living someone else's life. In almost every single photograph, Natalie was perfectly posed and aware of the camera, while I looked slightly uncomfortable and awkward, like I was trying way too hard to fit into her sophisticated world. When exactly had I become so completely disconnected from my authentic self? The financial reality of our relationship hit me particularly hard during this reflection period. I decided to check my bank accounts and add up exactly how much money I had spent on our relationship over the past 3 years. The total was absolutely staggering. Nearly $72,000 on expensive trips she had insisted we take to maintain our social image, high-end restaurants, where the bill always mysteriously landed in front of me, gifts for her various work milestones and achievements, and of course the substantial wedding fund that I had been building entirely on my own. Meanwhile, her financial contributions to our relationship had been minimal at best. She would occasionally cook dinner for us or buy me birthday presents that were thoughtful, but nowhere near equivalent in value to what I had been spending. It wasn't just about the raw dollar amounts, though. It was about the fundamental imbalance in our relationship. There had been constant taking on her part, with very little giving in return. I had been so completely blinded by what I thought was love that I hadn't noticed how completely one-sided our partnership had become over time. A week after receiving that devastating breakup text, I finally forced myself to make the painful phone calls to cancel all of our wedding vendors. Each conversation was emotionally difficult in its own unique way, as I had to explain that the wedding was off without going into embarrassing details about what had happened. Most of the vendors were understanding and professional about the situation, though I did lose some deposits that couldn't be refunded. One vendor in particular really stung, a small family-owned bakery that was going to make our wedding cake. The owner, a sweet older woman who had seemed genuinely excited about the design we had chosen during our tasting appointment, sounded so disappointed when I called. "You two seemed so in love when you came in for the cake tasting," she said softly, and I could hear the genuine sadness in her voice. "I thought we were too," was all I could manage to reply before ending the call. After canceling the last wedding vendor on my list, I poured myself a cup of coffee and sat out on my balcony, watching the Chicago rain fall steadily outside. For the first time since receiving that life-changing text message, I felt tears actually welling up in my eyes. But these weren't tears for Natalie, or for losing her. They were tears for the future I thought I had been building, for the life I had carefully planned and then lost, and for the person I had twisted myself into becoming over the past 3 years. But beneath all that grief and disappointment, something else was beginning to stir inside me. A quiet but growing determination, and a slow realization that I had actually been given a chance to reclaim my authentic self before making what would have been the biggest mistake of my entire life. As painful as this whole experience was, maybe it was also a gift in disguise. That's when my phone lit up with another notification, an email from the mortgage broker confirming the complete withdrawal of my application. The subject line read, "Application terminated, future options available," and it felt oddly prophetic given my current state of mind. What Natalie didn't know, what nobody in my life knew at that point, was that I had started noticing some weird and suspicious things in the weeks leading up to her devastating text message. There had been signs that I can see clearly now, looking back with fresh perspective. She had been receiving late-night work emails that she would immediately hide her phone screen for whenever I walked into the room. There were unexplained client dinners that seemed to run suspiciously late into the evening. I noticed the way she would instantly lock her phone the moment I approached, even if we were just sitting together on the couch watching television. I had noticed all of these strange behaviors, but I just didn't want to believe what they might actually mean for our relationship. I had been desperately trying to convince myself that there were innocent explanations for everything I was observing. But now, with everything falling apart around me and my entire future in ruins, I felt like I was finally seeing our relationship clearly for the first time in years. So instead of immediately replying to her lawyer's increasingly frantic messages, or trying to salvage anything from this wreckage, I made a conscious decision to stay completely quiet. I wanted to let them panic and wonder what my next move would be. And in that deliberate silence, The real truth about Natalie started bubbling up to the surface in ways I never could have anticipated. 3 days after receiving that cold, impersonal text message, there was an unexpected knock on my apartment door around 8 o'clock in the evening. I wasn't expecting anyone, and when I looked through the peephole, I was shocked to see Natalie's father, Mr. Chambers, standing in the hallway. The last time I'd seen him was at a family dinner about a month earlier, when he had given this deeply emotional speech about how proud he was to welcome me into their family as a future son-in-law. Now he just looked tired, embarrassed, and uncomfortable. He didn't even bother with a polite greeting before blurting out, "What's going on with the house situation?" I folded my arms across my chest and looked him directly in the eyes. I'm not buying a house with someone who tells me we're finished by text message and then sends her lawyer to communicate with me. Are you here as her representative? Or are you here as someone who wants to understand what actually happened? His eyes immediately darted down to the floor, and I could see the shame written all over his face. No, I'm here because she won't tell us anything straightforward. 1 minute she's saying the wedding's completely off, and the next minute she's screaming about furniture invoices and credit checks and how she's going to be humiliated in front of all her coworkers at Apex Marketing. For a brief moment, I actually considered telling him everything. All my growing suspicions, all the red flags I had been ignoring, all the ways his daughter had been manipulating and controlling me. But I decided against it and simply said, she ended our relationship. I respected that decision. Now she can handle the consequences of her actions for once in her life. He nodded slowly, processing what I had said, then muttered something under his breath that sounded like, "I told her not to do this," before turning around and walking away. I watched him leave from my doorway, and this strange sense of calm settled over me. But I had no idea that the real bombshell revelation was about to drop and change everything I thought I knew about my relationship with Natalie. The next morning, I received a call from my brother Daniel. We had always been incredibly close growing up, but Natalie had successfully driven a wedge between us over the past year with her constant comments about him being too blue-collar and not fitting in with what she considered our new, more sophisticated social circle. I hadn't actually talked to him in almost a month, which now seemed ridiculous and shameful. "Hey, bro," he said, and I could hear the hesitation in his voice. "I heard about what happened with Natalie from Ethan. Listen, there's something I've got to tell you that I probably should have said months ago, but I wasn't sure how to bring it up." My heart immediately started racing with anticipation and dread. "What is it, Daniel?" There was a long, uncomfortable pause before he continued. "Remember that renovation job I was doing at that fancy apartment complex downtown? The Riverside Heights place? Yeah, I remember. Well, I saw Natalie there with some guy. They were going into his apartment together, and they looked really cozy with each other. I didn't know what to think at first. Maybe it was just a work-related thing or something innocent. But the way they were touching each other, the body language between them." He trailed off for a moment. "I actually took a picture with my phone, just in case. But I wasn't sure if I should tell you about it. I didn't want to mess things up between you two if I was wrong about what I was seeing." While we were still on the phone, he texted me the photograph he had taken. It was definitely Natalie, wearing a dress that I had never seen before, standing very close to some tall guy with perfectly styled hair and an expensive-looking suit. His hand was positioned on the small of her back in a way that definitely wasn't just friendly or professional. The timestamp on the photo showed it was taken 2 months ago, right in the middle of our most intensive house hunting period. "The guy's name is Brandon," Daniel continued. "I asked around with some of the maintenance guys who work at that building, and apparently he's some hotshot investment banker who drives an Aston Martin. Real douchebag type who constantly brags about his expensive watch collection to anyone who will listen." Brandon. The name immediately clicked in my memory. She had mentioned him several times over the past few months, but always just as a difficult but important client from her marketing firm. She would say things like, "Brandon is being demanding again," or "I have to work late because of Brandon's project." I guess he was important to her in ways I never could have imagined. After we hung up, I went into full investigation mode, determined to uncover the truth about what had really been happening in my relationship. I pulled up Natalie's Instagram account and immediately noticed that most of her recent posts were suddenly set to private, which was definitely a red flag since her account had always been public before. But I could still see photos where other people had tagged her, and there was one particular image from a charity gala that had been posted 3 weeks earlier. This was the same weekend she had claimed she was going to a girls' retreat at some expensive spa. She wasn't prominently featured in the photo, but I could clearly see her arm and part of her distinctive dress in the corner of the frame. And standing right next to where she would have been was this guy, Brandon, looking exactly like the man from Daniel's photograph. I kept digging deeper into this mystery. I checked our shared cloud photo account that we had originally set up for wedding planning purposes. In the recently deleted folder, I discovered several selfies of Natalie that I had never seen before. They were clearly taken in an upscale apartment that definitely wasn't mine. Some fancy place with floor-to-ceiling windows and a spectacular view of the Willis Tower. Exactly the kind of luxurious place that a successful investment banker would call home. All the pieces were starting to fit together in a way that made my stomach turn. The sudden complaints about my salary and career trajectory. The constant comparisons to her friends' husbands, who were really going places in their careers. The increasing pressure for me to move to an expensive neighborhood that we genuinely couldn't afford on my income alone. The comments about how I should dress better and network more aggressively to advance my career. She hadn't just been cheating on me. She had been actively upgrading to what she considered a better option, and I was nothing more than the stepping stone that was no longer needed in her grand plan. I took a full day to process all of this devastating information, allowing the waves of anger and hurt to work their way through my system completely. Then I did something I hadn't done in nearly a year. I called my old college buddy Victor, who had been offering me a position at his engineering firm in Cincinnati. It was a job opportunity I had turned down specifically because Natalie had insisted we needed to build our roots and establish our careers in Chicago. "Hey, stranger," Victor said when he picked up the phone, and I could hear the genuine surprise and pleasure in his voice. "To what do I owe this unexpected pleasure?" "How's that job offer looking these days?" I asked directly, not wanting to beat around the bush. There was a brief pause, then he started laughing. "You finally dumped the princess, didn't you?" He had never been particularly fond of Natalie, though he had always been polite about it. "The job's still completely open, man. $140,000 base salary plus full relocation assistance. When can you start?" For the first time in days, I found myself actually smiling. "How does next month sound to you?" The conversation with Victor felt like discovering a life raft in the middle of a devastating storm at sea. He didn't press me for details about the breakup or make me explain what had happened. Instead, he launched into enthusiastic descriptions of the exciting projects I would be working on, the talented team I would be joining, and the incredible hiking trails that were just an hour's drive from Cincinnati. It was exactly what I needed to hear. A glimpse of a future that had absolutely nothing to do with Natalie, or the life I had been trying so desperately to build with her. After we hung up, I felt genuinely energized for the first time since receiving that devastating text message. I pulled out a notepad and started making comprehensive lists of everything I needed to accomplish. Things I needed to do to leave Chicago behind, items I wanted to pack or sell, people I needed to contact about my move. It felt incredibly good to be moving forward with concrete plans, to have a clear direction that was entirely my own decision. That night, I allowed myself to really think deeply about the implications of what I had discovered about Natalie's betrayal. She hadn't just been cheating on me in the traditional sense. She had been methodically and calculatingly constructing a backup plan, a better option in her eyes, all while simultaneously pushing me to make a financial commitment that would have completely crippled me if she had gotten her way. The calculated, manipulative nature of her behavior was what hurt the most. I found myself lying awake wondering how long she had actually been seeing this Brandon guy. Had she been with him before she even accepted my marriage proposal? Had our entire engagement been nothing more than an elaborate farce, a convenient arrangement she was maintaining until something better came along? These questions made my stomach turn with a mixture of rage and disgust. Sleep completely eluded me that night. Instead, I found myself scrolling through our entire text message history, searching for clues I had missed. And there they were, scattered throughout what had seemed like innocent everyday messages. There were mentions of late meetings that perfectly coincided with dates on her Instagram posts at events I wasn't invited to. There were last-minute cancellations of our plans for sudden work emergencies that now seemed much more suspicious. And there were increasingly frequent complaints about my lifestyle choices, my financial decisions, and even my hobbies and interests. By morning, I was completely exhausted, but felt more clear-headed than I had in months. I drafted a formal email to my landlord giving proper notice on my apartment lease. I applied for an Ohio driver's license online to begin the process of establishing residency. I sent emails to the few close friends I had managed to maintain despite Natalie's constant disapproval, letting them know about my upcoming move and my desire to reconnect. Each action I took felt like a deliberate step away from the mess she had left me in, and a genuine reclaiming of my independence and authentic self. But even as I was actively moving forward with my life, Natalie's presence continued to linger like a persistent ghost. Her lawyer sent yet another email, this one more demanding and threatening than the previous ones, insisting that I had both legal and moral obligations regarding the house purchase. I simply forwarded it to a lawyer friend without bothering to respond directly. Her father's parting words, "I told her not to do this," kept echoing in my mind. What exactly had he been warning her against? Was it breaking things off with me? Or was it the specific way she had chosen to do it? It was becoming increasingly clear that Natalie's carefully constructed public image was beginning to crack under the mounting pressure. And I had a strong suspicion that the revelation of her affair with Brandon wasn't going to be the only secret about to come to light. Just when I thought things couldn't possibly get more dramatic or complicated, my bank called the next morning. This wasn't an automated message or routine customer service call. It was an actual fraud prevention specialist on the line, which immediately got my attention. Apparently, someone had attempted to withdraw the entire $26,000 from our joint wedding savings account at 11:37 p.m. the previous night. The transaction had been automatically flagged as highly suspicious because it was attempting to transfer all available funds to a private checking account that was registered under only Natalie's name. The bank's security systems had blocked the transaction and prevented it from going through. I immediately requested a complete freeze on the account and asked for detailed records of all recent access attempts. While I was still on the phone with the bank representative, my email notification pinged with a new message. The subject line read, "Urgent regarding wedding funds," and it was from Rebecca Goldstein, Natalie's lawyer. The email read, "Mr. Thompson, my client is deeply concerned about the funds currently held in the joint savings account for your now canceled wedding. As she made several significant payments into this account and paid various vendors directly out of her own pocket, she believes she is entitled to reclaim a substantial portion of these funds." I stared at my computer screen in complete disbelief. This was an absolutely brazen fabrication of the truth. I had every single bank statement and deposit record clearly showing that 100% of that $26,000 had come directly from my personal checking account. Natalie hadn't contributed a single penny to our wedding fund. She had always kept her money completely separate from mine, claiming it was smarter financially for her to handle certain expenses directly. But now she was attempting to steal my life savings and claim it was partially hers. I immediately forwarded the fraudulent email to Victor, who had mentioned that his brother-in-law practiced family law. His response came back within minutes. "Save absolutely everything. Every email, every text message, every document. Get yourself a lawyer yesterday." So that's exactly what I did. That same afternoon, I scheduled a consultation with Linda Morgan, who was reportedly the toughest and most successful family law attorney in Chicago. Her retainer fee wasn't cheap, $5,500 up front. But the moment I explained my situation in detail and showed her all the evidence I had been gathering, she immediately agreed to take my case. "Mr. Thompson," she said with a smile that reminded me of a predatory shark, "you've been remarkably restrained and professional given the circumstances you're dealing with. But it's time to protect yourself properly. Miss Chambers is clearly attempting to commit fraud, and we're not going to let that happen." She drafted a formal cease and desist letter to Natalie's lawyer that very same day. The letter included comprehensive bank records, proving that the money in question was solely mine, as well as detailed screenshots of the attempted unauthorized withdrawal. She also strongly advised me to completely cut off all direct contact with Natalie and let everything go through proper legal channels from that point forward. That night, my phone absolutely exploded with notifications. Natalie had tried calling me 8 times in rapid succession, and when I didn't answer any of her calls, she started sending a barrage of increasingly desperate text messages. "I can't believe you actually got a lawyer involved in this. We need to talk about this situation like rational adults. You're being completely irrational and vindictive. Did you really freeze our joint account? I need that money to pay for all the wedding cancellation fees." I didn't respond to any of her messages. Instead, I forwarded every single one to Linda as evidence and then blocked Natalie's phone number entirely. The next morning, Ethan called me again, and he sounded extremely stressed and uncomfortable. "Dude, Natalie came into our office yesterday absolutely livid about something. She was telling anyone who would listen that you're trying to systematically bankrupt her and that you're withholding her own money to pay for wedding vendors who are now threatening to sue her." "That's very interesting," I replied as calmly as possible, "considering I have comprehensive records showing that I personally paid for everything and she contributed absolutely nothing to our wedding expenses." "Yeah, well, there's more. Ethan said, and his voice dropped to almost a whisper. She's also telling people around the office that you were controlling and manipulative during your relationship, and that's the real reason why she had to end things so suddenly. She's claiming that you monitored her spending and systematically isolated her from her friends. My blood ran completely cold when I heard this. She was trying to paint me as the abuser in our relationship, when she had been the one who controlled every single aspect of our life together, constantly criticized my friends and family, and had systematically driven away everyone who mattered to me. Ethan, you've known me for years. Do you honestly believe any of that about me? Of course not, he said quickly and emphatically. But the problem is that people at work don't know you the way I do, and Natalie can be extremely convincing when she wants to be. After we hung up, I immediately forwarded this alarming new information to Linda. Her response was swift and decisive. This completely changes our legal approach. We need to gather witness statements from your friends and family about her controlling behavior, and we need to address these false accusations before they spread any further. The next 48 hours became a complete blur of intensive legal preparations. Linda had me systematically gather detailed testimonials from friends and family members about Natalie's controlling and manipulative behavior throughout our relationship. My brother Daniel provided a comprehensive sworn statement about witnessing her with Brandon at the apartment complex, including the photographic evidence he had captured. I compiled a complete timeline of our entire relationship, documenting every red flag I could remember in hindsight. All the criticisms she had made about my lifestyle and career, her systematic isolation tactics that had driven away my friends and family, and the various financial manipulations she had employed to control our relationship dynamic. While this legal preparation was happening, Natalie's lawyer sent yet another email, but this time with a completely different tone from her previous communications. My client is genuinely distressed by the escalation of what she viewed as a private matter between two people who once cared for each other. She is willing to forego any claim to the joint account if you will agree to assist with resolving the house situation. The translation was crystal clear. Natalie had suddenly realized she was caught red-handed in a blatant lie about the money, and was now desperately trying to use her false claims as leverage to get me to help with the house purchase that she could no longer afford on her own. Linda's response was absolutely beautiful in its simplicity and directness. My client has comprehensive documentation of Miss Chambers' deliberate attempt to defraud him, including her unauthorized attempt to access funds that were demonstrably his alone, and her subsequent defamation of his character to mutual acquaintances. We are fully prepared to pursue this matter to its complete legal extent if necessary. There will be no negotiation regarding the house, which was never actually purchased, nor any funds which belong solely to my client. That's when things really exploded in ways I never could have anticipated. I spent that evening continuing to pack up my belongings, sorting through years of accumulated possessions, and deciding what was actually worth taking with me to Cincinnati. The process turned out to be surprisingly therapeutic, evaluating each item carefully, asking myself whether it truly brought value to my life, or if it was just something I had acquired over the years to please Natalie. The expensive watch she had insisted I needed for important client meetings? I was definitely selling it. The pretentious art books that I had never actually read but she claimed were essential for appearing cultured? Straight to the donation pile. My beloved collection of science fiction novels that Natalie had banished to a closet because she thought they were childish and unprofessional? Those were definitely coming with me to Cincinnati. As I worked through my possessions, my phone continued to vibrate constantly with text messages from unknown numbers. Friends of Natalie's, I assumed, trying to guilt me into responding to her, or somehow get involved in the situation. I ignored every single one of them. Linda had been absolutely clear about maintaining no contact except through proper legal channels. Around midnight, exhausted but satisfied with the progress I had made on packing, I checked my email one final time before going to bed. There was a message from an address I didn't recognize, with the subject line, "You should know the truth about Natalie." My finger hovered over the delete button for a moment. It could easily be another manipulation tactic or some kind of trap. But curiosity ultimately won out, and I opened the message. The email was from a woman named Olivia, who claimed to be a former coworker of Natalie's at her previous company. According to Olivia's account, Natalie had a well-established history of latching onto successful men, using them to advance her career and social standing, and then discarding them when someone better came along. She did exactly the same thing to her last boyfriend, Olivia wrote. He was a successful doctor who bought her a car and paid for expensive renovations to her apartment. When he proposed marriage, she suddenly found all kinds of reasons to break it off. 2 weeks later, she was openly dating her boss at the company. I stared at my computer screen, completely unsure what to make of this information. Was it legitimate or just someone with a personal grudge against Natalie? I forwarded the email to Linda without adding any comment and finally went to bed, my mind racing with new possibilities and questions. The next morning brought a surprising and unexpected development. I found a voicemail from Rebecca Goldstein, Natalie's lawyer, asking to speak directly with Linda regarding a potential resolution to our dispute. The tone was markedly different from all her previous communications, much less demanding and confrontational, much more conciliatory and diplomatic. Something significant had clearly shifted in their position overnight. I called Linda immediately to relay this message. "Interesting timing," she remarked thoughtfully. "I was actually just about to call you myself. I did some investigating into Miss Chambers last night, and it seems your situation isn't unique at all. There's a clear pattern of behavior here that could be very relevant if this case actually goes to court." "Are you talking about the email from Olivia?" I asked. "Partly that, but there's significantly more evidence than just one person's account. Let's just say your ex-fiancé has left quite a trail of financial entanglements and questionable behavior behind her. I've got a call scheduled with Miss Goldstein this afternoon. In the meantime, how's the packing process coming along?" I smiled at her subtle reminder to keep moving forward with my plans regardless of the legal drama swirling around me. Making good progress. Cincinnati is starting to feel very real. "Excellent," Linda said firmly. "The best revenge is living well, Mr. Thompson. Always remember that." As I hung up the phone, my doorbell rang with another unexpected visitor. This emotional roller coaster showed absolutely no signs of slowing down anytime soon. Later that night around 10 p.m., I received a Facebook message from an account I didn't recognize. There was no profile picture, just a simple name, Brandon Mitchell. The message was brief but intriguing. "We should talk. I don't want to be part of whatever game she's playing." My hands were literally shaking as I typed back my response. "Talk about what?" His reply came back almost immediately. "About Natalie, about all the lies she's been telling both of us." We agreed to meet at a coffee shop downtown the next morning. I arrived early, partly out of genuine curiosity about what he might tell me, and partly to scope out the location first, in case this was some kind of elaborate trap or setup. But right on time, in walked the guy from the photograph Daniel had taken. He was tall with perfectly styled hair and an expensive watch glinting conspicuously on his wrist. The classic finance bro stereotype come to life. He spotted me immediately and walked over with his hand extended. "Jack, I'm Brandon." We got our coffees and found a quiet corner table where we could talk privately. For a minute, we just sized each other up awkwardly, both unsure how to begin this surreal conversation. Then he spoke first. "I need to know something before we go any further. When exactly did you and Natalie break up?" 4 days ago, she texted me saying the wedding was off." He looked genuinely surprised and taken aback. "She told me you two broke up months ago. She said you were just finalizing the house purchase out of guilt because her family had already invested money in it." I felt that familiar knot forming in my stomach again. "That's a complete lie. We were engaged and planning our wedding until the day she sent that text message. The ceremony was scheduled for June." Brandon ran his hand through his perfectly styled hair, looking genuinely distressed. "Jesus Christ. We've been seeing each other for almost 3 months now. She told me her ex was clingy and wouldn't accept the breakup. That's supposedly why she couldn't post about us on social media yet. 3 months. I repeated that time frame in my head, doing the math. That covered our entire house hunting period, the final wedding venue selections, even the romantic cake tasting we had done together just weeks earlier. "There's more," Brandon continued, looking increasingly uncomfortable. "She told me you had serious issues, that you were controlling and even physically intimidating sometimes. She said that's why she had to end things quietly and carefully. I felt like I had been physically punched in the gut." "That's absolutely not true. I never laid a hand on her, never even raised my voice in anger. Ask anyone who knows me personally." Brandon nodded slowly, seeming to process this information. "I believe you completely. Things haven't been adding up lately with her stories. Last week she told me she needed $17,000 for some urgent investment opportunity. She got really upset and almost hostile when I hesitated to give her the money. Then yesterday, she called me crying hysterically about how her vengeful ex was trying to ruin her financially and professionally." He gave a humorless laugh. "I'm guessing that vengeful ex she was referring to is you." My lawyer sent a cease and desist letter after she tried to empty our joint savings account and then lied about contributing to it, I explained. We talked for almost 2 hours straight, comparing stories, timelines, and the various lies she had told each of us. The picture that emerged was far worse than I had even imagined. Natalie hadn't just been cheating on me, she had been living a completely double life, playing both of us for financial gain and personal advancement. She had told Brandon I was abusive to explain why she was sometimes unavailable when she was actually with me. She had told me she was at work events when she was really spending time with him. She had been pushing me to buy a house I genuinely couldn't afford, while simultaneously pressuring him to invest in her various business ideas and schemes. As we were getting ready to leave, Brandon hesitated and looked uncomfortable again. There's one more thing you should probably know. Last month, she started talking about being pregnant. My blood ran completely cold. Pregnant? Yeah, but when I started asking logical questions about doctor's appointments and timelines, she quickly backtracked. She said it was too early to tell for sure, and that she didn't want to get our hopes up. I thought it was strange at the time. I thanked him sincerely for meeting with me and for being honest about everything. As we stood up to leave, he looked me directly in the eye and said something I'll never forget. We both dodged a bullet here, man, but you were the brave one who actually called her bluff. Armed with this shocking new information, I met with Linda again the next day. She advised me to document absolutely everything from my conversation with Brandon, especially the false abuse allegations, which she said were particularly serious from a legal standpoint. We have more than enough evidence to file a comprehensive defamation suit, she said confidently. But first, let's see how they respond to our initial legal position. I didn't have to wait very long for an answer. That evening, I received another call from Ethan, and he sounded completely freaked out. Dude, the craziest thing just happened at work. Natalie got a phone call while we were in an important meeting, and she suddenly ran out of the room looking like she had seen a ghost. 20 minutes later, she came back, quickly packed up her desk, and left the building. Her boss is saying she's taking personal leave effective immediately. What the hell did you do? I told him about meeting with Brandon and comparing notes on all of Natalie's lies and manipulations. Ethan was stunned into complete silence. Holy shit. So the guy actually contacted you directly? Wow. There's more, I said, and explained about the pregnancy claims and the abuse allegations, all of it. Damn, Ethan whispered. I knew she could be manipulative and controlling, but this is next-level psychotic behavior. The next morning, my phone rang with an unknown number. Against my better judgment and Linda's explicit instructions, I decided to answer it. Jack, this is Rebecca Goldstein, Natalie's attorney. I need to speak with you directly. I immediately started to reply that all communication should go through my lawyer, but she cut me off before I could finish. I'm no longer representing Miss Chambers. I resigned from her case this morning after discovering that my client provided materially false information throughout our professional relationship. I cannot and will not be party to fraud or defamation under any circumstances. I was completely speechless. Her own lawyer had dropped her as a client. Later that same day, I received an email from Natalie's work address. The subject line simply read, "Please." Against Linda's explicit advice, I opened it. Jack, I know I've made terrible mistakes and hurt you deeply. I'm seeing a therapist now and taking medication for my mental health issues. I never meant for things to spiral this far out of control. Brandon told me that you two met and talked. I know how everything looks from your perspective, but it wasn't like that at all. I was confused and scared about our future together. Please don't file any lawsuits against me. My parents are absolutely devastated by this situation. My job is on the line. I'll do anything to make this right between us. I didn't respond to her email. Instead, I forwarded it directly to Linda with a note that read, I think she's finally realizing that actions have consequences. The final communication in this entire saga came exactly 1 week later, and it wasn't from Natalie, but from her father. He called and asked if we could meet at a small park near my apartment. Against my better judgment, I agreed to see him one last time. Mr. Chambers looked like he had aged an entire decade in just 2 weeks. The confident, successful businessman I had known was completely gone, replaced by a worried father with dark circles under his eyes and a defeated posture. Jack, he began, his voice rough and strained, I owe you a sincere apology, a big one. He paused for a long moment before continuing. Natalie, she's not well. She's been officially diagnosed with some serious mental health issues that we've been trying to address. That's not an excuse for what she did to you, and I want you to know that the person you thought you knew and loved, in many ways, she wasn't real. He went on to explain that Natalie had been struggling with significant mental health issues since college, but had consistently refused any kind of professional treatment. The perfect image she projected to the world was an elaborate facade that required increasing effort and manipulation to maintain over time. "We've finally convinced her to enter a residential treatment program," he said sadly. "It's the only way forward for her. But before she left for the facility, she asked me to give you this." He handed me a sealed envelope. Inside was a cashier's check for exactly $26,000, the precise amount of the wedding fund I had saved, along with a handwritten note that simply said, "I'm sorry for all the pain I caused you. You deserved so much better than what I gave you." We parted with an awkward handshake that somehow turned into a brief emotional hug. As he walked away toward his car, he turned back one final time. "By the way, congratulations on the new job in Cincinnati. A fresh start sounds like exactly what you need right now." Epilogue. It's been 6 months since I moved to Cincinnati, and I can honestly say it was the best decision I've ever made. The job with Victor's company has been incredible, challenging, rewarding, and surrounded by colleagues who appreciate my work without any hidden agendas. I've been hiking those trails Victor mentioned almost every weekend, and I've reconnected with parts of myself that I had lost during those 3 years with Natalie. My brother Daniel and I are closer than ever. He visits regularly, and there's no tension or judgment about his career or lifestyle. My old friends have welcomed me back with open arms, and I've made several new friendships that feel authentic and supportive. I still think about Natalie sometimes, but not with anger or bitterness. I genuinely hope she gets the help she needs and finds a way to build healthier relationships in the future. As for me, I'm taking things slow when it comes to dating. I'm learning to trust my instincts again and to recognize red flags before I get too emotionally invested. The most important lesson I learned from this experience is that love shouldn't require you to lose yourself. The right person will appreciate who you are, not try to reshape you into someone else entirely. To anyone reading this who might be in a similar situation, trust your gut. If something feels wrong, it probably is. And remember that sometimes what feels like the worst thing that could happen to you turns out to be exactly what you needed to reclaim your life. Thanks for reading, Reddit. Sometimes the best thing that can happen is having someone show you who they really are before you make the biggest mistake of your life.